Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing a Dark World deck profile. So I'm really excited to do some for you guys because this deck is an extremely powerful deck that can swarm the field with all sorts of awesome boss monsters to help you control the board and go in for game. So without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards. Like getting your name scratched in every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Rainbow. Rainbow is one of our main boss monsters for this deck. This card has an awesome ability that you can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning a level 7 or lower Dark World monster that you control back to your hand. And if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add a level 5 or higher Dark World monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of this card, which is a really powerful effect to instantly get to cards like Grapha or Silva, which is such a cool ability. We then played 2 copies of Grapha. Grapha is really good as a 2-of in the build because this card has the ability that you can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning a face-up Dark World monster that you control back to your hand, except another copy of this card. And if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you target one card that your opponent controls and destroy it, which is a really cool effect. We then play 2 copies of Silva. Silva is absolutely broken. This card is amazing to help you hand rip your opponent to basically make it so they start with pretty much 0 cards in their hand. This card has the ability, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon this card from the graveyard. Then if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, your opponent returns exactly 2 cards from their hand to the bottom of the deck in any order, which is an absolutely broken effect because we have ways to be able to make our opponent discard this card to the graveyard, like our copy of Cerule, which is absolutely insane. To be able to return this card back to your hand and Cerule back to your hand with cards like Security Dragon and Akashic Magician is absolutely broken, so we can use it multiple times to be able to hand rip the opponent. We then play 3 copies of Snow. Snow is really good as a 3-of in the build because if this card is discarded to the graveyard, we can add a Dark World card from our deck to our hand. We then play 3 copies of Genta. Genta is definitely a 3-of in the build because this card literally searches our field spell. This card has the ability you can only special summon this card once per turn, but you can discard this card to the graveyard to add one the Gates of the Dark World from your deck to your hand. And if this card is banished and you control a Dark World card, you can special summon this card back to your side of the field, which is a really cool effect to be able to bring this card back to the field. We then play a single copy of Cerule. Cerule is really good as a 1-of to help you get your copy of Silva discarded by your opponent. As if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you special summon this card from your graveyard to your opponent's side of the field in face-up defense position. And when this card is special summoned by a card effect of a Dark World card, your opponent must discard a card, but since it's special summoned to our opponent's side of the field, it means we discard a card, and since it's our opponent's card now, they'll make us discard a card, which is our copy of Silva, to rip 2 cards out of our opponent's hand, which is absolutely broken. This card is really good as a 1-of in the build because it's so easy to get to, which is why you use this card to be able to discard your copy of Silva from our hand. We then play a single copy of Salamander. Salamander is a really cool 1-of tech card in this deck, and I really like this card because you reveal this card and a fiend monster in your hand and special summon one of them and discard the other. And when a monster is destroyed by a battle involving your fiend monster while this card's in the graveyard, you can add this card back to your hand, but you can only use each effect this card once per turn. I feel like you only need a single copy of this card, but it's a really cool tech card to be able to play in this build. We then play for the Danger Monsters. We're going to start off with a single copy of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is really cool in the deck as a 1-of, and all of your Danger Monsters actually share an awesome common effect. That you're going to reveal this card in your hand, and your opponent randomly chooses one card from your entire hand to discard. Then, if the discarded card was not the danger that you revealed, you special summon that danger to your side of the field, and if you do, draw a card, which is a really cool ability to be able to use, but all of your dangers have unique abilities if they're discarded to the graveyard. For example, your copy of Bigfoot has the ability, if this card is discarded, you get to target a face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it. We then play 2 copies of Danger Nessie. Danger Nessie is really cool as a 2-of in the build because if this card is discarded to the graveyard, you can add a danger card from your deck to your hand. We then play 2 copies of Mothman. Mothman is really cool as a 2-of in the build because if this card is discarded to the graveyard, you can have both players draw a card and then both players discard a card, which is an amazing ability. We then play a single single copy of Danger Chupacabra. Chupacabra is really good as a 1-F in the build because if this card is discarded in the graveyard, you can actually target a danger monster in the graveyard and special summon it back to your side of the field, except a copy of Chupacabra, which is a great effect. We then play a single copy of Jackalope. Jackalope is great in the build as a 1-F as well, as if this card is discarded, you can special summon a danger monster from your deck in defense position, except another copy of this card. And then finally play a single copy of the Danger Noodle, Danger Tsuchinoko. This card is really good as a 1-F in the build, because regardless if this card is discarded or its effect goes off, you get to special summon it. As if this card is discarded, you just instantly special summon it to your side of the field, which is a pretty cool effect. So, that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get in to the spells. So for the spells, we're going to start with a single copy of Card Destruction. Card Destruction is one of the most broken cards in the entire deck. This card has the ability of both players to discard their entire hand, which is going to make all of our cards go off, which is absolutely broken. We then play a single copy of Triple Tactics Thrust. Thrust is really good as a 1-F in the deck to be able to get to cards like Card Destruction or a copy of Talent. This card has a lot of cards that you can get to in the deck, and it's just a really good 1-F in the build. We then play a single copy of Talents. Talents is really good as a 1-F in the build because this card has the ability to let you draw 2 cards, take control of an opponent's monster, or look at your opponent's hand, and choose a card from it and shuffle it into the deck. This card is really helpful as a 1-F in the build, as you can get to it with your copy of your Thrust, but if you don't have a copy of Thrust, you can actually play 2 copies of Talent instead. But if you do have a copy of Thrust, I highly recommend playing it in this deck. We then play a single copy of the Dark World Fusion spell. This card is amazing to help us go in for a copy of Grapha. This card is really cool to be able to play because during the main phase, you get to fusion summon a Fiend Fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing materials mentioned on it from your field or grave. And if you fusion summon a Dark World monster this way, you can also discard monsters as material as well. And during your main phase, if this card's in the graveyard, you can add this card back to your hand and then discard a Dark World monster, but you can only use each effect this card once per turn. This card is amazing to help us step into our copy of Grapha, and it's just a really cool card overall. We then play a single copy of Dark World Archives. Archives is really cool as a 1-F in the build, but you only need a single copy of this card, and has the ability during your main phase, you can actually discard a Dark World monster, and if you do, Dark World monsters that you currently control gain attack equal to the level of the discarded monster had in the hand, times 100 until the end of the turn. And if a monster whose original type is Fiend is discarded from the hand by the card effect of a Dark World card, or by an opponent's card effect, even during the damage step, you can discard a card and then draw 2 cards, which is a really cool ability to help you just dig into the deck. We then play a single copy of Called by the Grave. Called by the Grave is really cool as a 1-F in the deck to basically just stop your opponent's hand traps when we're going in for all of our plays. We then play 2 copies of Dark Corridor. Corridor is really cool as a 2-F in the build because this card is basically roted for the deck, but it is a once per turn, which is why we just play 2 copies. This card lets us add a Dark World monster from your deck to your hand, then discard a card, which is a really cool ability to use, but you only need 2 copies of this card because it is a once per turn, which is very far and few between with Dark World cards. We then play 3 copies of the Gates of the Dark World. This card is an amazing 3-of field spell that all Fiend monsters gain 300 attack and defense, and once per turn, you can actually banish Fiend monster from your grave, discard a Fiend monster, and then draw a card, which is a great ability to be able to use. We then play 3 copies of Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin is amazing in this build, just to help us dig into the deck and basically play a 37 card deck. This card also lets our opponent gain 1,000 life points, but it's usually not going to matter because we're going to have such a broken field that they're probably either going to surrender or we're going to be able to go in for game on the follow-up. We then play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness. Allure of Darkness is amazing as a 3-of in the build, just to help us draw 2 and then banish a dark monster from our hand, which we have plenty of dark monsters to banish in this deck. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get in to the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to start off with 2 copies of Grapha, Dragon Overlord of Dark World. This card is an amazing 2-of boss monster that's absolutely broken. This card does take a copy of Grapha plus any dark monster to make this card. And it has the ability, when your opponent activates a monster effect or a normal spell or trap card, while this card is on your side of the field, you can actually have the ability that you can make that effect, quick effect, you can activate this effect that the activated effect becomes your opponent discards a card, which is such a cool ability to be able to use. You obviously have to have a hand to be able to resolve that effect, but it makes all of your Dark World cards go off. It makes it so that your opponent is making you discard a card, which is absolutely insane. This card also has the ability, if this fusion summon card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, you can special summon one of your original copies of Grapha to your side of the field, which is a really cool effect to be able to instantly do, and then each player discards a card, which is a really cool ability. We then play a single copy of number 60. Number 60 is just broken in this deck because it makes it so that you can draw 2 and discard a card, double the attack of a monster, or bring a monster back in the grave to your side of the field. We then play a single copy of number 38. This card is a walking spell negate, which is why I play this card as a 1-of in the build. We then play a single copy of Typhon. Typhon's great in this deck because it's so easy to make in so many different situations, which is why I play this card as a 1-of in the build. We then play a single copy of Underworld Goddess. Underworld Goddess is really good to be able to make in the deck because it helps you out your opponent's towers like boss monsters. We can play a single copy of Skull Dread. Skull Dread is amazing in the deck, but you only need a single copy of this card. It's really good to be able to use it to draw 4 and then put 3 back, and also to be able to special summon a monster from your hand. We can play a single copy of Appaloosa. Appaloosa is amazing in this build as 1-of to establish multiple monster negates on the field. We can play a single copy of Nightmare Griffin so we can Griffin lock the opponent, which is absolutely insane to be able to do with our copy of Mudracker, and it's just absolutely broken to play in this deck. We then play a single copy of Nightmare Unicorn to spin stuff off the field, 1 copy of the Dark Charmer. Dark Charmer's amazing to be able to bring dark monsters back from the opponent's graveyard, 1 copy of SP Little Knight, which could be a copy of Nightmare Phoenix if you don't have a copy of SP Little Knight, or even a copy of IP Masquerena, so we can step into a copy of Underworld Goddess or Nightmare Unicorn during the opponent's turn. You don't have to have this card for this build because the deck's already strong enough, but this card does help out a little bit to be able to use it as a double interruption. We then play a single copy of Akashic Magician and a single copy of Security Dragon. These cards are basically the exact same card. They let you return a card that's pointing this card to your hand and a card that your opponent controls back to the hand, which is a really cool effect to be able to bounce our copy of Srul and Silva back to our hand so that we can use their effects all over again to hand rip the opponent again. These cards again are basically the exact same card with your copy of Security Dragon and your copy of Akashic Magician, basically just bouncing cards off the field. We then play a single copy of Mudracker. Mudracker is really good as a 1 of the build so we can Griffin lock the opponent but also bring Fiend monsters back from the graveyard, which is really cool to be able to do. You make this card in the extra monster zone and then you make your copy of Griffin where your copy of Griffin is pointing up to your copy of Mudracker to basically Griffin lock your opponent, which is absolutely insane. So that's it for the deck, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Definitely tell me what you think of this deck down in the comments down below. It's super fun to be able to play. I absolutely love playing Dark Worlds. It's really fun to be able to just combo off and summon out all sorts of awesome boss monsters to control the board and make absolutely insane boards. Plus, Dark Worlds have some of the coolest artwork in the entire game. It's just a really fun deck. So that's gonna do it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of Notification Squad, and quick shout out to one of my patrons, Slade, which is an absolute like crazy Dark World fanatic, and this deck is super fun to be able to play against him. So quick shout out to Slade, and that's gonna do it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of Notification Squad. We'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.